You know, there's a growing sense, maybe more than a sense, that the foundations of democracy in Israel are really being tested right now.
Yeah, tested in some pretty unprecedented ways, it feels like.
Exactly. So today we're diving deep into a recent YouTube analysis. It features Andrew Bustamante to try and understand these political earthquakes we're seeing over there.
Right, the goal is to get past the sort of day-to-day headlines, isn't it?
Yeah, to really grasp the core shifts happening.
It's striking, how fast the narrative around Israeli democracy seems to have shifted. It was, for so long, considered this, well, beacon in a really complex region.
Absolutely.
And now, suddenly, there are these fundamental questions being asked about its health, its direction,
And just for context, we're talking about Benjamin Netanyahu, who leads the Likud party.
often described as conservative, yeah.
Think maybe Republican Party in the U.S., but generally seen as further right and with a very strong Orthodox Jewish base.
Right, that's a key part of his coalition.
So after the awful attacks on October 7th, there was this war cabinet formed initially.
Which seemed like a moment of democratic unity, didn't it?
It did, especially given Israel's history as, a pretty vibrant democracy.
That initial move, bringing in different political voices during a crisis, that felt significant at the time.
It really was. But then Benny Gantz, who's a major centrist figure, he's even been a rival for PM.
Right, a former competitor.
He decided to leave that war cabinet, said he had fundamental disagreements with Netanyahu's direction,
Okay, and Netanyahu's response.
dissolved the whole thing, just gone.
Wow, that's a pretty decisive move.
Yeah, and one with huge implications, surely.
Well, it certainly concentrates power, doesn't it? Especially at such a critical time during an ongoing conflict. It raises serious questions about, the breadth of decision-making.
It really does. And it makes you think the analysis we're looking at actually draws parallels here
Oh, yeah?
between the controversies around Netanyahu,
Yeah.
the corruption charges, the legal cases.
Those have been going on for a while.
Right. And even these incredibly serious accusations tied to the assassination of former PM Yitzhak Rabin.
Wow.
Parallels between all that and the kind of political storms we've seen around Donald Trump in the U.S.
I can see that. The leader facing intense, ongoing scrutiny, legal challenges,
Exactly. It feels like a similar pattern.
and those kinds of persistent legal issues, the ethical questions swirling around a leader, they can really erode public trust over time, can't they? Trust in the institutions themselves.
And this is where it gets, I think, really crucial for understanding the current mood. The analysis points out that Netanyahu's popularity within Israel had dropped quite significantly before October 7th.
Okay, so he was already facing political headwind.
Very much so. And this unpopularity, combined with the absolute shock of the attacks, well, it unfortunately fueled some pretty extreme conspiracy theories.
Oh, well, like what?
The idea that he somehow, allowed the attack to happen to basically keep his grip on power.
Right, those kinds of theories often emerge in times of crisis and low trust. Of course, no evidence for that.
No evidence at all, it's important to stress. But the fact these theories even got traction says a lot about the level of public distrust, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It shows a deep dissatisfaction and a real questioning of the government's motives and actions, even if the theories themselves are way out there.
Okay, so let's really get into the core argument here. The analysis basically claims we're seeing a genuine weakening of democratic norms in Israel under Netanyahu.
Not just political disagreements, but something more fundamental.
Exactly. It's about the pillars, the principles that hold up a healthy democracy.
And the analysis points to several specific actions,
It
right?
says, what are they?
Well, disbanding that war cabinet is one. The fact that elections haven't been called, despite, shifts in public opinion. And also reports of crackdowns on protests happening within Israel, all cited as, well, potential signs of democratic backsliding.
And it's not just domestic stuff either, is it? The analysis suggests he's now acting pretty much independently on foreign policy.
Yeah, pointing to actions in Lebanon, Iran, Yemen.
As examples where big decisions seem to be made without much broader political buy-in.
That kind of concentration of foreign policy power in one person, especially when it involves sensitive things like military action, it does make you ask about the checks and balances,
Definitely. Which brings us to the Mossad, Israel's intelligence agency.
Renowned, yeah.
The analysis really highlights that it reports directly to the prime minister.
Who, as they correctly point out, functions very much like a president in Israel's system. He's the chief executive.
So that direct reporting line, Well, maybe it allows for quick action sometimes.
It can also raise those concerns about unchecked executive power, especially in wartime. You could maybe draw a loose parallel to debates in the U.S. about executive power and intelligence oversight, like post 9/11.
Exactly. The worry is about effective oversight. If Mossad answers only to Netanyahu, and he's making these big foreign policy calls seemingly alone, where's the robust accountability?
It's a fair question. Strong oversight of intelligence is pretty crucial in any democracy to prevent misuse and ensure actions align with national interests.
Okay, let's zoom out a bit. The analysis also tackles the global reaction to the conflict in Gaza, the destruction, the humanitarian crisis.
And the argument is that this has badly damaged Israel's image internationally.
Yeah, significantly damaged its standing.
And, I mean, there's little doubt the length and scale of the conflict have led to widespread international condemnation. You see it everywhere, a real erosion of public support for Israel in many places.
And the perspective offered in the analysis is quite sharp, isn't it? It suggests Netanyahu's actions aren't really about finding peace or building diplomatic bridges.
No, it argues they're more about serving his own personal and political needs, prioritizing his survival, basically.
That's a strong claim.
The analysis even mentions these alleged secret recordings. Have you heard about these?
Vaguely. What do they supposedly show?
Where Netanyahu apparently expressed his opposition to a two-state solution flat out,
Right.
and even claimed he'd work to undermine the Abraham Accords.
Undermine them. Wow. If that's true.
If it's accurate, yeah, he would strongly suggest his own political agenda comes before those broader diplomatic goals.
That's serious stuff. And it leads right into the potential for regional escalation, which the analysis also covers.
Yeah, the recent killings that foreign negotiator, the Hezbollah commander, cited as real flashpoints.
So what's the immediate worry, according to this analysis?
A pretty high likelihood, it suggests, of a coordinated retaliation from Hamas and Hezbollah.
Both reportedly backed by Iran.
Exactly. And the scenario they paint is, frankly, deeply concerning.
Which is?
The potential for a multi-front war against Israel, attacks from Lebanon in the north, Gaza in the west.
And possibly missiles from Iran itself.
That's the fear, a simultaneous assault from multiple directions.
And the geography, as the analysis points out, is tough. Israel's small, surrounded.
Right, so facing a coordinated multi-front attack, maybe even with ground assaults, it raises serious questions about how effective even sophisticated defense systems can be.
It's a massive strategic challenge for any country, surely.
Absolutely. Confronting major threats on multiple borders at once is a nightmare scenario.
So, circling back to Netanyahu's motives, the analysis really hammers this point. He's focused primarily on his political base.
Especially that Orthodox Jewish base, yeah.
And on his own political survival, maybe even putting that ahead of the wider interests of Israel itself.
If that's accurate, focusing so narrowly on political survival over broader national interests, well, that's a huge challenge for effective governing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And for long-term stability.
Then there's the U.S.-Israel relationship, always complex.
Enduringly complex is a good way to put it.
The analysis highlights how tricky the U.S. position is. It can't really fully step away.
No, the strategic alliance is too deep. The economic ties, the political influence of the American Jewish community.
It makes a full disengagement almost impossible, even when there are big disagreements on policy, right?
Precisely. The relationship is just too embedded in too many ways.
And it's important to remember something. The analysis brings up the difference between Jewish people globally and citizens of Israel.
A crucial distinction, often blurred in public discussion.
Israel's a diverse country. It has Arab citizens, Muslim citizens, alongside the Jewish majority.
Absolutely. Understanding the diversity within Israeli society itself is key to getting the nuances right.
And on democracy, again, the analysis touches on the separation of religion and state, or maybe the lack thereof.
Yeah, arguing that Israel doesn't fully adhere to that principle, which is often seen as, fundamental in Western democracies.
Presenting it as another area where democratic norms might be considered weaker.
Well, the role of religious law alongside civil law in Israel is definitely a long-standing debate. How that balance works has real implications for secular democratic principles.
So looking down the road, what possible futures does this analysis sketch out?
Well, it does mention the possibility that Netanyahu could eventually be forced out of power.
How?
Either through elections, whenever they might happen, or potentially through those ongoing legal cases finally reaching a conclusion. Convictions, maybe.
So political or legal pressure could eventually lead to a change.
That's what the analysis suggests is a potential outcome, given all the pressures.
And the U.S. interest in a two-state solution keeps coming up.
It's a constant theme.
The analysis argues this U.S. focus is partly driven by, well, dependence on Middle Eastern oil.
And also the need to manage relationships with key Arab allies, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Oman, Bahrain, Qatar.
Who have their own populations concerned about the Palestinians.
Exactly. For the U.S., regional stability is paramount geopolitically. And the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is just seen as this major ongoing source of instability.
So the two-state solution is viewed by many, including the U.S., as the main pathway to maybe calming things down long term.
That's the prevailing view in much of the international community, yeah. A potential route to a more stable future.
And Netanyahu, in this view, is seen as a major roadblock to getting there.
Well, his public statements, those alleged recordings we mentioned, they certainly don't align with setting up two independent states side by side. He seems to be an obstacle, according to this analysis.
It's fascinating, too, to hear about that planned meeting before October 7th.
The Abraham Accords expansion.
Yeah, involving Saudi Arabia, maybe Sudan, aimed at broadening peace, getting more recognition for Israel.
It makes you wonder what if, doesn't it? That normalization process had real potential to reshape the whole region.
And having that momentum disrupted is, well, it's a huge setback for that vision.
A very significant development, yes.
And just to kind of underline the general instability, the analysis briefly touches on the civil war in Sudan.
Just as another example of the turbulence across the wider Middle East.
It's a good reminder, isn't it? The Israeli-Palestinian conflict isn't happening in a vacuum.
Not at all. It's deeply embedded in this much larger web of regional complexities, historical grievances, and interconnected challenges.
So if we try to pull all these threads together, this deep dive into the analysis really paints a concerning picture.
It does. You've got these allegations of democratic practices eroding inside Israel under Netanyahu.
Then you've got the heightened risk of a wider regional war sparked by recent events.
And underneath it all, the intractable Israeli-Palestinian conflict playing out against this backdrop of shifting global opinions and alliances.
It really shows how instability in one corner can ripple outwards, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It affects global energy, diplomacy, international security.
Right.
Everything feels connected.
It really does underscore that interconnectedness. So maybe the question to leave people thinking about is, what does this current path in Israel suggest for the future of democratic values, not just there, but maybe across the Middle East?
And what could be the wider ripple effects, the consequences of these developments for the region and, for the rest of the world?
Yeah, it's definitely a complex situation, lots of different perspectives, and clearly no easy answers.